Right. So, hey guys, Mr. Ridgway here. Hope you're all doing well. So, if you are looking for a walk through this lesson, that's what this video here is for. So today we're going to be taking a look at what are some of the big legacies and some of the big effects of World War II, and also, I guess, by proxy, kind of World War I as well. So let's go ahead and we will jump right into it. So for the warm-up, you'll see right down here, again, just click on your block, either block 1 or block 4. I just want you to make some guesses. What do you think are some long-term effects that come out of World War II? Okay, so we might have to look back at the lesson, make some predictions, some guesses, and we'll go from there. Okay, so what we're going to first do in here is, first of all, just actually now look at some of the very more tangible resources and things on some of the human and geographical effects that come out of World War I and World War II. And what you can do is you can pick one of the four, okay? And then on slide number 8, which is in the future, you can go ahead then and begin to brainstorm some of these. Now, I do recommend that on the notes that are on slide number 8 that you begin to write some of these down. If you're having to do this lesson on your own because of your e-learning or something like that to that degree, I recommend you probably look at all four of these at least to some degree. So the first one, and I'll just kind of briefly explain it, is an overview, okay, of some of the big effects. So that's kind of like a potpourri, if you will. The next one, okay, looks at probably something that's a little bit more difficult to understand from a larger point of view. So I know that in here that we haven't exactly like talked about the Holocaust directly. That's because a lot of you guys have already been exposed to this material. So instead, taking a bit of a different tack on it, we get to look at a more complex issue, which is how did others help carry out the Holocaust, even though they might not have been part of the Nazi Party. So an effect of this, for example, you kind of have to like take a big step back. Like, what's going to be the effect of neighborhoods and communities when you have members of for example, of your community turning in, like you have teachers turning in their students, or policemen assisting the Nazis, and that's what that's asking you to kind of think about. 6. So this is another effect of the war, is the actual beginning of a creation of a legal justice system. So I kind of gave that one away, but looking at how do we deal with things like international war crimes, and how do we prosecute those? And then this number 7 gives you the chance to look at again kind of some a smattering of a lot of these effects, and you can even have some practice making an acronym of their own. So when we take them together, we kind of end up with this slide here, and it says Brainstorm Effects of World War I and World War II. And it says, note, the resources today will help with the effects of World War II. You'll need to go back and think to come up with ideas for World War I. What I would like you to do at this point in the video, if you haven't done any of those resources that I've shown, or you haven't taken the opportunity, for example, to go up here and click where it says Notes and make a copy of it, is I recommend you pause the video now, because I'm going to go ahead and spoil a lot of the answers for you. Again, I'd like you to attempt these on your own and then come back and watch the rest of this video to kind of get your walkthrough. Okay, so go ahead and pause, and I'm going to assume now that you've paused, and yeah, okay. So with thinking about World War I and World War II, when we're talking about human geography, or just the effect on people, I mean, I think something that's true in both wars is just the sheer loss of life, right? So sheer loss of life. I mean, that's going to be true in both World War I and World War II. It just is, right? We can't get around that. The other thing, though, about people in World War I is that there are some like particular like effects that this has on like just how the loss of life is different in different places. So, for example, like you could say, for instance, that because of things like the PALS battalions that are really popular in Europe, where you would have like entire communities of young men who all knew each other, they would be put into the same like battalion or regiment, because that would, increase the odds that they would sign up. Well, what happens then is when they get into combat and trench warfare and they all get mowed down, well, like, entire communities just lose all of their young men, and that has like a really, really devastating effect. I think also there, in terms of like effects on people that happen in World War I, I think something that we can't also forget is just the resentment that comes out of World War One, particularly in Germany. You could also say, though, for the United States, we get isolationism, kind of wanting to leave the world stage for a while, and that's more of a U.S. phenomenon. Okay, so I would say like those are some like more the bigger effects on that we see in people in World War One. And don't get me wrong, I think there's absolutely like many ties that we could make that are specific to particular groups of people. So we could say resentment in Germany and Japan, right? So we could even toss Japan in there if we wanted to. In terms of the effect on people in World War II, so this one is really, really important and really, really profound in a bunch of ways. For example, you could say that the U.S. becomes the world's #1 superpower. That has a huge effect on people across the globe. I mean, it will for the entire Cold War. So mentioning that, you could say the U.S. versus Russia, which we call the Cold War. That's going to be something that comes out of here too. Other effects on people. I would also say that, if I'm just kind of brainstorming here and thinking about other effects on people, I think one that we have to mention is the Holocaust. And I would also say with that too, because this also affects people, in the creation of Israel. I think also connected to that is the idea of refugees and migration. There's a huge amount of that happens because of World War II. People leaving particular countries that have been totally devastated. Let's see if there's anything else that comes to mind that I would mention. I think the other one with people maybe is that I would mention is the creation of the UN is a big one. That's a huge change in how people across the world are going to interact with each other, even if it's just large countries doing so. So again, like this is just things that I'm like thinking of off the top of my head. And of course, you might look back at the lesson and find other things that I totally missed, and that's totally fine. Now, physical geography, the environment, well, what changes? In World War I, there's the most obvious thing is that like you could say trenches everywhere, right? And those are going to kind of scar the landscape for the next, few years. I think the other thing, though, too, to mention with the environment is after World War I, we have the creation of new countries. So, for example, like Austria becomes its own country, and Hungary becomes its own country, and Poland becomes a country. I mean, Turkey is another one. There's all these new countries that get created. In terms of other environmental effects, maybe I could mention the invention of poison gas. Because that's something that continues to come up. Let's see. I think right now those are my biggest environmental ones that I'm kind of settling on. We may come back and add more to those. In World War II, in terms of effects on the environment, I would definitely say that you could tie like nuclear warfare to, or at least nuclear testing and weapons. They have a huge environmental effect, okay, whether that's, radiation and, thinking about nuclear waste, other environmental things. I would also say just like the rate of industrialization in many countries increases. Okay, the United States being one of those, of course. I'm trying to think that any others are coming to mind. Those two are like the big two that stand out to me. Think if there's anything else. Those two are the ones that really kind of pop forward in my mind in terms of big environmental effects. Yeah, I'm satisfied with that. So that would be like my master copy if I were to make one. So cool, we did that one together. Awesome. And then the thing that I'd like you to do, and this is kind of what wraps up the lesson, is now that you've done that brainstorming, I basically want you to turn your chart that you just made, and again, this is on the last slide, slide number 10, into a Rad response, okay? So basically, the thing that I want you to keep in mind with this is that if you, for example, because you're going to explain what was the effect of World War I on human geography or physical geography, so you need to pick one with each war. So let's say, for example, that I decide to do human geography with World War I. I talk about the effect that it had on people, right? What you need to keep in mind is I cannot do the same thing. I can't do human geography again in World War II. So you need to switch. So for example, like I have to do physical geography then in World War II, and talk about the environment. Or for example, if I do physical geography, the effect on the environment in World War I, I can't do that in World War II. I need to go and I need to do what were the effects on people in World War II. So you need to do them kind of catty corner, if that makes any kind of sense. Okay, so try to do aim for a paragraph on each. It's really giving good details in your answer. You may end up that your rad statements are more like R A A A A A, and then with some details scattered in. That's totally fine. As opposed to restate and then a single answer and then detail. But again, I'm just looking that you can actually prove what you're saying here. So assess how the physical geography, the environment, or human geography of a region was altered by World War I and World War II. Okay? So once you do that, you turn this in here on this Google form is where you type it out, and then I'll see you guys in the next lesson. All right, see ya. Bye-bye.